going to be Division I talent or, even future NBA talent. And then just, came to enjoy it even more and more. And it became a nice side project or hobby. And really, there wasn't maybe a single person that, I really sort of looked up to, but it was just folks that continuously produced high quality content like the Paul Biancardis of the world, like the Evan Daniels of the world, guys that really just had the best interest of providing legitimate exposure, to all sorts of prospects and, shooting people straight on, how top prospects are performing and what the rankings were. So it wasn't really one person, but just, I really appreciated high quality content regardless of who it came from and what medium it was on.
Yeah, so me and Global Kid Media, we interviewed Paul Biancardi on the same show, and we had him on Zoom, and he was a great interviewer, and we were just honored to have him on the show. And obviously, he's one of the best in the game when it comes to seeing talent in basketball. So for you, what's it like working with him on a daily basis on this podcast?
I learned so much. He's ESPN's national director of high school recruiting. He's been a Division I head coach for 10 plus years. Went to the double NCAA tournament. So he's seen basketball through every single lens at all of the different levels, and then has really helped grow ESPN's high school basketball coverage over the last X years. And I think it's safe to say in 2020 the exposure that high school basketball is getting, largely because of these platforms like House of Highlights and Ball is Life and Instagram and TikTok and social media in general, is as strong as it ever has been. A lot of these top prospects have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Instagram followers. So it's great to learn from Paul. How does he actually evaluate talent when coaches look for kids? Like, what are they actually looking for? What are the nuances and tendencies that they can pick up on? What goes into the rankings? The rankings are, people latch onto the rankings quite a bit because there's, it's sexy to be able to say, oh, this is the number one kid or the number one shooting guard. So it's great to learn directly from Paul, like how he does his best job, or he and his team do the best job they can to, provide a list, to provide rankings. But he always encourages kids, don't worry about the rankings, worry about improving your game, and that the rankings are more of an output.
So take me back to the first time that you connected with Paul, and how did this podcast come about? And obviously you guys been doing some shows currently, but take me back to your guys' first show, and how did this podcast come about?
Yeah, so the first show, so Paul and I have known each other for a couple of years. We both lived in the Charlotte area, and we talked high school hoops and worked on a couple of side projects here and there. And the podcast started, I guess, at the beginning of the year, right before we really went into quarantine. And the idea was, hey, can we provide a separate platform, or a unique platform for just high school basketball talk? If you look at the podcasts that are out there, that everyone has a podcast, but there's very few podcasts that are solely dedicated to high school basketball. And high school basketball is such a glowing and flourishing business that we feel, hey, there's an audience that wants to consume high school basketball content. So the first couple of episodes, it's called the High School Basketball Happenings Podcast. We talked about what were the key happenings that we're taking on in the high school basketball space. Who are the top teams? Who are the top players? Who are the best dunkers, the best shooters, the best defenders in the class? And it was largely perspectives that Paul and I provided. And then when we went into quarantine, we started doing interviews with a lot of the top players. So Greg Brown Jr., who is at Texas and a top 10 recruit in the class of 2020. Micah Peavy Jr., who is a top 40 recruit and is now at Texas Tech. They were some of our first guests on the platform. And almost every week since then, we've had a top high school player in the nation on the podcast, just to talk about how they've been staying in shape in quarantine. What's something that they like to do above and beyond basketball? What's the outlook for them and their team for this upcoming season? So it's a great way to get to know these prospects on the court and off the court. And we've been lucky to have, many of the top 5 players in the nation, between Amari Bailey, Jonathan Kuminga, Jalen Green. We had James Wiseman, who is now, soon to be pro, but was the number 1 player in the ESPN class of 2019 rankings. So we've spoken to a lot of top guys, and it's been great to get to know them and really know what makes them tick above and beyond just, what we see on House of Highlights or Ball is Life or the other social platforms.
Yeah, so speaking of, I watched the whole James Wiseman interview. That was awesome, by the way. So he's obviously a top talent in this draft, and I wonder who will pick him up, but he's projected to be number one, I think. But what did you learn from him in that interview, and what did you guys get out of it? His personality wise, off the court and on the court, and obviously he works hard every day. So, but what did you guys learn from him during that interview?
An incredibly poised and mature young individual. Obviously, he's a little bit older than some of the other folks that we have on the platform because he's already been through a year of college. I guess what a couple of things that I learned was how much he loves basketball. Whenever we asked him a non-basketball question, he always found a way, genuinely, it wasn't rehearsed or choreographed, to tie it back to basketball. So I think he really is a student of the game, as is spending his free time watching film, watching other players to pick up on tendencies that he can incorporate into his game. And then really learned how well-rounded he was. So at the end of the podcast, he talked about how he learned Mandarin in high school, so he dropped a couple of phrases in Mandarin, and he talked about a couple of the books that he was reading. So I think he's a really personable kid with a very good head on his shoulders. I think he will be a huge asset to whatever team he goes to, not only because of what they're getting on the court, but because they're getting a very professional, young man that's going to have his head put on, approach things the right way, be a student of the game, try to gobble up every morsel of information that he can that will ultimately help him be the best player that he can be.
So speaking of the draft, outside of James Wiseman and Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball, do you guys have any prospect that we should keep an eye on? Obviously, Cole Anthony's there too, but is there any like outside? I know there's an overseas prospect everybody's talking about, but outside of those four, do you see anybody surprising in this draft? Or
So the player that I like the most is Isaiah, the sort of sleeper or dark horse, maybe outside of the top five, is Isaiah Stewart. Isaiah Stewart was a top 10 ranked player in the class of 2019. He played for City Rocks on the EYBL circuit, played 1 year at Washington. Call it 6'9", incredibly strong, has a great frame. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have the most deadly, jumper or outside shot that you want from someone that plays the power forward or even the center position, but has such a great motor. When I watched him a decent chunk in EYBL, and he was always going 100%, running up and down the court, never taking a play off. And those are the types of players that I think, regardless of your height and regardless of your physical attributes or your ability to shoot, I think if you hustle and will play defense and run the floor and rebound, you will find a spot in the NBA. So I'm a big fan of Isaiah Stewart. I think right now most of the draft boards have him projected as a mid to late first round pick. He's one that, outside of the top 3 or 4 guys you mentioned, I think will be a good NBA player.
Interesting. So I think in this year's draft, there's a lot of sleepers, and I think diamond in the rough players too in the back end of the draft. So it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of other players will be in there. But my next question to you, back to your podcast. Obviously during this tough time, how often do you guys do shows, and are you guys currently working on something big for your next episode?
Yeah, so right now we do shows, call it once a week, once every 2 weeks. Most of them now have become interviews, more so than Paul and I having back and forths. And the interviews were great, especially during the quarantine period, because everyone was stuck inside. They were looking for some content. A lot of the top players that we were interviewing, they didn't have, pickup runs or organized games that they were going to. So right now it's just continuing to get new folks onto the platform, and then sort of behind the scenes, we're working on how do we continue to distribute the content to audiences that may be interested in media formats that are most amenable to them, because someone who is 15 years old is going to want to consume that content very differently than someone that is 30 years old. So that's sort of probably the more operational, foundational stuff we're working on behind the scenes.
So obviously we're in a unique situation. Obviously sports are back, but some fans are in the stadiums in different sports, and some fans are not. Obviously, college sports feed off their fans, and how weird it's going to be when college basketball comes back and high school basketball comes back, and potentially not seeing fans in those stadiums, because I feel like these college players do feed off the fans in college sports. And
Yeah, it's gonna be incredibly awkward to see. But if I had to pick between having basketball in a safe way with no fans or no basketball at all, I'm picking basketball with in a safe way. I went to college at Duke, which has one of the most energetic, passionate fan bases in the country, not only in the student section but all the other folks that are there. And I can't imagine going to a game at Cameron Indoor Stadium, especially a big time game against a Miami or a UNC, and not having 10,000 people screaming and jumping around, for 90 minutes or 2 hours. It's something I can't even fathom, but will be a reality. We'll just all have to accept for some period of time here in the next couple months.
so speaking of Duke, what was your experience there and being in there in person in the stadium, seeing the fans and seeing the team playing at a high level? And what do you think of Coach K, legendary coach and one of the best?
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience at Duke, particularly. I went to a handful of games every year, and Duke was pretty good when I was there. We won the championship my sophomore year, which was just a lot of fun to see. Everyone partaking in all sorts of festivities. But that Cameron Indoor Stadium environment is, I don't want to say inimitable, but it's a relatively small stadium. It's less than 10 or 11,000 people. I can't remember what the exact capacity is, and students are always bringing the energy. There's a lot of creativity in the taunts and just the way that the Duke fan base really tries to rile up the Duke team. So being up close and personal for a handful of those games was an awesome experience. And although it was years ago, I still have these indelible memories of just how loud the stadium truly was. So yeah, even now I'm growing fond and thinking back to those moments many years ago.
What has Coach K meant to the team in Duke and to all the fans and to all the players he had throughout his career? So what has Coach K meant to the team?
Yeah, his record speaks for itself, and he didn't always have success early on, but eventually he built the program, and it's been cool to see really in the last 10 years the evolution of the program. From really going after a lot of the kids that historically were going to be great 4-year players, like the Kyle Singlers, the Nolan Smiths, the John Shires of the world, to more of the one and done phase, which has happened in the last couple of years. Between players like Marvin Bagley Jr. or Wendell Carter or Trayvon Duvall. So it's been quite a fundamental shift in Duke basketball, and that's largely because of Coach K and his staff. But I think what has been maybe most admirable is seeing how they've done it the right way, or perceived to see how they do it the right way. I think there's a lot of coaches and programs have come under fire for improper benefits and doing things under the table, and I'm guessing some flavor of that happens has happened at every institution, just because the rules are constantly up in the air, and there's maybe not a formal way that the NCAA can really enforce things at an individual school level. But it's been cool to see Duke have the continued success that it has had without sort of consistent scandals that have rocked other top blue blood schools in the last couple of years.
So I'm just curious. I just had to bring this up because when I'm watching Duke games on TV, sometimes it's kind of weird. Do you know the reason why they had the benches on the opposite side and not on the not the usual side?
I don't know. So you have the way that Cameron Indoor Stadium is set up is you have the court, and then on one side of the court you have the student section, which is 10 rows of students, and they pack all the students in like sardines. And then on the opposite side are the benches and the scores table, and then the parents and guest sections are right behind the benches. I don't know how atypical that is, but that's just the way that the layout of how Cameron Indoor Stadium has been for a handful of years, and the rest of the general admission fans are on the second level.
So, have you in throughout your career have you covered any other college basketball games and high school games in person, and then were you able to get to interview most of these players, the games that you covered?
Yeah, so been lucky enough over the last X years to go to a lot of the highest quality high school tournaments. So there's the Thanksgiving annual Hoop Fest in Dallas, which 2 years ago had Jalen Green versus RJ Hampton, and that was an absolutely terrific matchup. Jalen Green and hit or not, that was against Samuel Williamson that he hit a buzzer beater and had 45 in that game. Was able to go this past year up to Springfield, Massachusetts for the Hoop Hall Classic, which had, again, a lot of the top teams, including Sierra Canyon, Montverde, IMG, and was able to be up close and personal for a lot of those games. So it was cool to just see how and then, have been to a handful of the North Carolina State Championship games and Texas State Championship games over the last couple of years. So it's been very cool and eye-opening to see at the highest level just how insanely talented these high school players who are going to turn into some of the top college players and eventual NBA draft picks, just to see how mature they are at 15, 16, 17 years old, and to see sort of their development and growth over time has been cool, because I can tie it back to an experience from watching them in person 4 years ago.
So speaking of Sierra Canyon, I actually interviewed one of their assistant coaches on my show, and that he spoke highly of the team. Obviously, a talented team, and obviously Bronny's on there, and also it's a funny story actually. I'm in New Jersey, and we have a school called Toms River North or South, and they came down here. It's the Sierra Canyon team for a tournament, a high school tournament in Toms River. I missed the tournament, and my friend told me about it. And, LeBron was there too, and the tickets were sold out. And but yeah, the Sierra Canyon team is loaded. And what do you think of their team? And does Bronny? I know Bronny's still young, but does Bronny remind you of his father a little bit, the way he plays?
Yeah, Sierra Canyon this year was an absolute circus of a show to follow. They had some five-star players in BJ Boston and Zaire Williams, who have both graduated and gone on to college. And they were, one of the top teams in the nation. They played an absolute murderers ropes, or they just played an incredibly tough schedule with all sorts of travel. They played Miniana Academy, which had Jalen Suggs and Chet Holmgren. They played Paul VI, which had Jeremy Roach and Trevor Keels, two of the top players in the Northeast. I think next year we had Amari Bailey on the High School Basketball Happenings podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we asked him about the 2020 to 2021 season outlook, and I think they will be very solid. They have Bronny returning at point guard, Amari Bailey at the two. Shai Odom is the class of 2022 prospect, who's a big, strong power forward. Harold Yu, who started on the team last year, big 6'7'3" Harold Yu, he returned. So they have a decent chunk of returning talent, and they've added a couple of high-level transfers as well from other schools, other players who are in the top 100 prospects. So I think they'll be another national program again this year, led by Amari Bailey, Shai Odom, and Bronny James. And to your question about Bronny, I think ESPN has him as the 24th best player in the class of 2023. I think he's got, a certain poise and maturity to his game. There's obviously a lot of comparisons with him against LeBron at that same age, so I'll sort of stay away from that. But from everything that I've seen, he's a very smart, well put together player who's not out there going to get his own numbers. He's going to do what's going to help the team win. And I think those are the types of players that you want. And then when you think about the support system and infrastructure that he has around him, I think he's got a bright future to be a great high school player, college player, and then even potentially a good pro player as well.
So if basketball returns in high school and college, what are you guys most looking forward to covering these games? And hopefully you guys can go into the stadiums to see in person. But what are you guys most looking forward to, though, through the high school season and college season?
Yeah, seeing good quality high school hoops, seeing how teams have navigated COVID so that individual players are staying in shape and staying sharp, and still building chemistry, which over the summer there wasn't the big Under Armour or Adidas or Nike EYBL circuits, so guys were having to find unique ways to stay in shape and keep their skills sharp. So it'll be interesting to see how the quality of basketball in December, January compares to the quality of basketball that we're used to seeing, just because I think the players will maybe be a little bit behind on their skill development, hopefully not too far behind on them being in shape. Because yeah, in quarantine you may not have been able to, get in a gym and play pickup 5-on-5, but you could go outside and run all day, right, and still try to stay in shape.
Yeah. So my next question. So I'm gonna a couple of my other friends they do podcasts also. So I'm gonna send you a couple of my other friends. You can check it out. They do really good interviews for their podcast, and I'm sure there's this one you should definitely check out. I'm sure you guys connected already. Global Kid Media, Vedant. He does really good stuff. He's only 14 years old, and he's interviewed over 1,000 people. And actually, he interviewed JJ Redick live from the bubble on his show when the Pelicans were still playing. Obviously, another Duke alum. But what do you think of him? And he's trying to be the first sideline kid reporter. So what do you think of the idea of having kids now as sideline reporters in sports?
Yeah, I love the concept. I know Vedant is very passionate about it. I actually met Vedant for the first time at Hoop Hall Classic, where I think he was doing some interviews. And for him to be so young and have that many swings of the bat under his belt already is only going to serve him well for as he continues to get even more and more opportunities and tap into different types of media. So very excited. I think he's got a very bright future in just the sports industry, whether it is becoming, the first kid sideline reporter for, a nationally televised game or whatever else, his future entails.
Oh, actually, he also interviewed the guy Nolan Smith on his podcast, Duke, another Duke alum, the one you just mentioned. Yeah, Vedant interviewed him on his show. So
Yeah, no, he's got like Patrick Mahomes that he's
yeah,
interviewed, quite a few top athletes.
yeah. So what other advice would you give these kids and young people that are trying to get into the same business as us, or even playing like as athletes too? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, on more of the podcasting media coverage, I think my one piece of advice would be take any opportunity you can to get a swing of the bat. And what I mean by that is if you can go to a game if you want to become a sports writer, you want to go to a game, or if you can go to a game and write up an article, like don't miss up on that opportunity. Or if you want to be in radio and you get a chance to do radio for a low level high school basketball game, it may not be the most prestigious, Sierra Canyon versus Montverde, but it's a great way to get your foot in the door, to learn, to cut your teeth, to connect with other folks, to really learn about the inner workings of how sort of the sports industry or high school sports or college sports or professional sports work. So my one piece of advice would be whether you're doing social media edits, producing written content, producing video content, don't miss out on any opportunity to get a swing of the bat.
Hmm. So I do this fun little segment now with all my guests that come on the show. It's called Rapid Fire segment. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right. Kawhi Leonard's laugh or Kevin Hart's laugh?
Kawhi Leonard's laugh. Kawhi Leonard's laugh.
Favorite food?
Favorite food: chicken pasta.
Hmm. So outside of all these prospects that are in this year's draft, who will have the better career in your opinion?
Who will have the best career in the 2020 draft?
Yeah, in the NBA.
Got it. I'm a big LaMelo Ball fan. I think he just has something that's like a feel to the game that's a little bit like almost innate that I don't even know if you can teach. Just the way that he moves, the way that he passes, the way that he reads the defense. So I'll go with LaMelo Ball as having the best career in the 2020 draft.
So the Timberwolves, obviously, they had the number one pick, and they're in a tough spot. So if you were a GM of the Timberwolves, what would you do in this situation, having the number one pick, and you have so much talent up there on the board, and if you have to between Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, obviously you said LaMelo Ball. Out of those three, if you were the GM, who would you be leaning towards right now on the board?
Yeah. So on paper, they already have D'Angelo Russell, who can play the 1 or the 2 position.
Yeah.
They already have Karl Anthony Towns. So do you need another center like James Wiseman, who, like Karl Anthony Towns, can stretch the floor, can run the floor very well? So I think on paper, you probably lean toward Anthony Edwards because you can play D'Angelo Russell at the point. Anthony Edwards can play off the ball in the 2. He was more of a shooting guard at Georgia. I think the NBA has evolved to where just find the best players that are going to be the best fit, and don't worry about who's a two, who's a three, who's a five. If you have enough talented players that buy in to whatever system your coach is, implementing, then I think that's the recipe for success. So I I think they end up going with Anthony Edwards at one,
Hmm.
but I could see James Wiseman and LaMelo Ball fitting in well, just because Wiseman can run the floor very well. If you want to play him and Karl Anthony Towns at the same time, that's it's maybe a little bit of a risk because you're playing two centers, and the NBA is kind of moving away from centers. But I would take whoever the best player available is, and then figure out how do you have them mesh with the rest of the team, sort of after the fact.
This would be crazy if this happens, but do you see do you see a possibility that Lamelo Ball drops to Golden State?
Yeah, so that Lamelo drops to two. Then do the Warriors want Lamelo Ball plus Steph Curry plus Klay Thompson plus Andrew Wiggins? Um, I think it'd be interesting, right? Lamelo's a California kid. Not that they need any help, selling out the arenas when fans eventually do return. I think the question for the Warriors is: do they want to take some young talent, or do they want to try to package that young talent up and maybe get another veteran, 3-and-D guy, or a power forward, or a center who can really run the floor, who
Hmm.
has some experience in exchange for Lamelo Ball and whatever other younger prospects that they have.
Hmm. So I'm a New York Knicks fan here, obviously in Jersey, and we've been going through a lot of struggles here, and we got unlucky again in the draft lottery with the eighth pick. And what do you see the Knicks doing at the eighth pick, if they, or do you see them potentially trading that pick to get a star player or someone? Because we need some kind of legitimate star player in this team. So
Yeah, I like. Maybe I'll answer your question a little bit differently. I think it'd be. I think Cole Anthony at 8 is a very real possibility.
hmm,
I think the most of the draft boards have Cole a little bit later in the first round, but he was one of the top, and I can't remember exactly where, but he was one of the top prospects in the class of 2019, along with James Wiseman. Maybe had a little bit of a disappointing. That UNC team was a little bit disappointing, but he's a New York City kid, right? His dad is from play. I think he played in New York. Greg Anthony. I can't recollect exactly where he played, but he's a New York City kid through and through. I think it would be great to have a point guard, someone that has the ball in his hands quite a bit, and um, so I would like to see the Knicks take Cole or find a way to get Cole Anthony on the team, whether he's worth the eighth pick or not. That's for James Dolan and team to figure out. But I think he would be a good fit. I think last year was not indicative of what he is capable of as a player, and you've got that New York City connection.
yeah, that'd be awesome if he drops to 8. That'd be that's a player I really like in this draft too. As a he's a underrated guard, and no one really talks about him, but he can shoot the ball. He just has. I mean, obviously there's a lot of room to improve, but when he does this, he can be a special player in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Knicks already have quite a few point guards, right?
Yeah.
You have Dennis Jr.,
Mhm.
Alfred Payton, Frank.
Frank Ntilikina, yeah.
So that's probably too many point guards. So you probably have to package someone else
Yeah.
on.
So my next question here, I saw a picture of you on Instagram with Garrett Williams from Tennessee, and now he's with the Celtics. What was it like? What was it like meeting him in person, getting to know him as a player off the court and on the court?
So I met Grant back when he was in high school 4 or 5 years ago. We were both in Charlotte at the time. This was before he went to Tennessee. Had a fantastic 3-year career, and then was a first round pick by the Celtics, and got some good minutes with them this season. Got some good playoff minutes as well. Is one of the most humble, down to earth kids that I have. Kids who have become high level players that I have come across. When you hear a lot of guys are high character guys, I would be hard pressed to believe that there is another player in the NBA who is as just like good, genuine, down to earth of a person as Grant Williams. So I'm incredibly bullish on him as a NBA player because he's still very young, even though he had a 3-year career at Tennessee. I think he's going to be very receptive to coaching and learning. And Boston has a fantastic coaching staff between Brad Stevens and Jay Larinaga, and there's going to be great people for him to learn from between, Ennis Cantor, Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. So I think he's got a bright basketball future, given he is young and he's going to do all the right things. And then probably even more jazzed up for what his days look like beyond basketball, because I think he is that good of a human being. So whether it's coaching or front office work or nothing to do with basketball, I think he's got a bright future.
Would have you considered covering games on ESPN with Seth Greenberg and Jay Williams and all these other college basketball analysts on ESPN?
I think that's an aspirational goal for a lot of folks. I'm really maybe even more interested in just high quality high school basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that college or pro basketball isn't interesting, because eventually high school kids become pro and college basketball players. But I probably get more jazzed up about high quality, high school games. But then seeing how those players translate to the college level, who are the people that do well in college that weren't even on the radar in high school, and why weren't they on their radar, is a fun exercise to think about.
So what are your overall thoughts on this NBA Finals, and do you think the Lakers ended tonight?
I do think they ended tonight. I think the NBA has done a fantastic job of making the best of this situation, creating a safe environment for the players. It's been fun to see, all the storylines that have popped up over seeing Boston's emergence, seeing how well Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson have played, has been great to see. So I'm very excited I've really enjoyed watching the NBA playoffs this year. I think they've done all the right things. I think the ESPN coverage and the TNT coverage has been great as well, considering all the circumstances. But yeah, I think the Lakers win by 8 to 12 points tonight. LeBron gets his fourth title, and I think he's going to get the Finals MVP unless Anthony Davis just does something preposterous over today and over any remaining games.
I think for Anthony Davis to win the MVP, he needs 45 points, 15 rebounds, because I think LeBron is, I think he's going to head towards the MVP. But Anthony Davis, he needs to have a crazy game, crazy stat line if he wants to win the MVP. But to be honest, I think I picked the Lakers in 6. I know the Heat will come out with, obviously they have to play all 48 minutes today, but there is a chance that the Heat could win tonight. But the Lakers are on fire, so I think I'm picking the Lakers to end it tonight, because my original pick was 6, but I can see the Lakers winning tonight. So
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. So a couple more things here before I let you go, and this is a question I've been bringing up to all my guests about the late Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, Mama mentality, and the rest of the people that were involved in the horrible crash. And he was one of my role models growing up. Do you remember where you were at that day, and what do they mean to you?
Yeah, it definitely is one of those flashbulb memories where I remember exactly where I was when someone told me, "Hey, like XYZ happened," and of course, the gut reaction is for everyone to pull out their phone. So I still remember, exactly where I was, who I was with, what the temperature was, and I think it just goes to life is short. Make sure you make the most of it. A lot of the stuff that is trite, but I think Kobe was destined to do great things above and beyond basketball. Whether it was philanthropic work or starting particular foundations or the Mamba Academy out in California. I think he was an incredibly successful player, had a very bright future, and there were so many stories of him just being such a shrewd businessman and investor. So I think the takeaway or learning is, life is short, and like, how do you make sure you maximize every single moment that you can, because you never know when it'll be taken away from you, whether you're 40 years old or 11, 12, 13 years old, like the players on the team were.
Yeah, so I know it's too early to tell in free agency, but this is my favorite time of the year after the NBA playoffs are done. NBA free agency, I love that, to predict where players will go. But obviously, there's a lot of rumors out there already with Anthony Davis being a free agent. So for you, I'm going to put you on the spot. So out of Anthony Davis, Giannis, Victor Oladipo, and all these other players that are being rumored, or like Bradley Beal, out of those players, who do you see playing in a different uniform coming up this next season?
So I think Anthony Davis definitely re-signs with the Lakers. Giannis has one year left on his deal. I don't think the Bucks would even entertain like, hey, there's a chance he might leave. Let me get some assets back. I don't think that's remotely on their radar, especially for a guy that's a top 3 or 4 player. I think you could see Bradley Beal, with the Wizards having a good, young core between folks like Thomas Bryant or Roy Huchimara. I could see them going young and saying, "Hey, we've got this incredible asset, Bradley Beal, who can be a huge value add to a lot of other teams. He's a top 25 player in the NBA." So I wouldn't be surprised the if the Wizards got a king's ransom back for Beal for a team that really wanted to make a move into the playoff hunt or even into the championship hunt. And then I know Doc Rivers just got there. I just don't know if Embiid and Simmons worked together. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was on the move.
How about Oladipo and potentially Paul George?
Yeah, though I think if you're the Clippers, you have to he's got 1 year left on his deal as well. Boy, the 2021 class,
Yeah.
the agent class, is going to be ridiculously good. I think you have to run it back. I wouldn't be surprised if they were favorites to win next year, even if the Lakers win this year, because they will have, they're an older team, they're a veteran team. They'll return a lot of the same players. This was a little bit of a learning year, just like last year was a little bit of a learning year for LeBron and the Lakers. And then Oladipo, I think I think the Pacers can be real contenders in the East. The East is going to be stacked next year between the Bucks, the Raptors, the Heat. Brooklyn is going to be very good, but I think Indiana can be a top 5 or 6 team with a healthy Oladipo, and he just hasn't been healthy the last couple of years. So I think they need to give it a genuine shot in earnest with Sabonis, Oladipo, Turner, Brogdon, all those guys fully healthy, and see if they can make a Heat-like run next year.
Yeah, I mean, first they need a head coach. It's gonna be interesting to see who's the head coach for the Pacers will be, and for the Clippers. The Clippers have no coach right now, and the Pacers. So I'm just really looking forward to see who they pick as the next head coach for both teams. But the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Yes, thank you to everyone. I mean, it's been said so many times, and it's worth belaboring for anyone that's been a frontline worker, not just in the medical industry, anyone that has been out there during these last few months to provide support to all that is going on, not just COVID, but all the protests and the movements and all the things associated with the election, to anyone and everyone who is, putting their own health at risk just so that we can, have some semblance of organization and efficiency. We are forever, and when I speak for the folks that sit behind a desk and in their house for a large chunk of the day, I think we are forever indebted to all that you all are doing out there.
Yeah, well said. And there it is, episode 551 in the books. Zain Motani. Go follow him on Twitter, Instagram. He's a high school basketball analyst and covers college basketball players too. He does a podcast with Paul Biancardi from ESPN, another great person to learn from. And man, thank you for joining me today on this podcast, the NR edition. I'll be posting this on all social media formats so people see this. And keep up the great work with Paul. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I love your podcast. Like I said, just keep grinding, and hopefully the high school and college season comes back soon. But enjoy the game tonight with the Lakers and Heat, and you're and your family stay safe.
Thank you for having me on this, and looking forward to seeing how you continue to develop your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, you as well.
Yep.